Hello, everybody. So we are here, and we are doing, as you see on the screen, Genesis 18. Okay, we are doing Genesis 18. So let's begin. And as you see by the title, this is visitors, celestial. Basically, how do I explain this in easy terms? Otherworldly visitors. Not talking about aliens like ET or anything like that. This is talking about like visitors that are not human. Okay, visiting. So we'll get into it. So let's look. And appeared to him Yahweh, right? So let's just define this. Okay. Jesus is God. Yes. Jesus is God and the body of a human. Okay. This is not this is not the spirit of Jesus possessed a human that already existed. This is God decided to create a vessel, right, that would contain and limit to a certain degree his presence, his power of who he is, his deity. This is why we have such verses as uh, Jesus not knowing the hour of his return. Okay, so we have Yahweh visiting. Yahweh, this would be uh, God, I guess, is the best translation. Okay, when I say God, I don't mean God the Father or just God the Son or just God the Holy Spirit. I'm talking about the deity, the whole deity, the Trinity. Okay, visiting Abram. Okay, and by definition, God is a celestial visitor. Okay, but we'll see if there's more than that. Okay. By the way, angels would also be celestial visitors. Okay, to him Yahweh by the oaks of Mamre. So Mamre would be an area. Okay. Okay. Trying to see if I can pull up the thing. Okay. So Mamre, strength or fatness, and Amorite. So we're gonna go with this one. An oak grove on the Mamre's land in the Palestine where Abraham dwelt. Okay, so the memory place is in the Palestine area where he's at. And as he was sitting in the door to his tent, now this is not an actual door. This is like, because tents don't have doors. This would be like the okay, opening doorway entrance, right? In the heat of the day. So basically, when it was like when the sun was above and it was uh, very warm, this would not be like morning or evening. So he lived, sorry. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, three men were standing by him. So there's the visits. Three men, okay, and the men, okay, men, male, in contrast. So it does describe a physicality to the visitors. They are not visiting as celestial visitors that are neither female or male. I'm sorry, female or male. They are male, okay, by definition. They look just like men, okay, and they were standing there, okay. So the idea is these visitors didn't just walk up to him. It wasn't like someone down there on earth. They he simply was relaxing, and he just happened to look up at a moment, and boom, there's people right there, okay. And they were standing by him, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them. So they were a little bit off, meaning they weren't standing right in front of him. They were a little bit away from him. That's why he ran to meet them. He was like, okay, let me go and meet them, okay, of the tent. And he bowed himself, this word right here, okay, see if I say it right. Vayishtachi. Sorry, Vayishtachu. Vayishtachu. He bowed himself. Okay? To bow down. Okay? And look at this. I can't move the mouse, but look at the second line. To bow down or prostrate oneself before superior in homage or before God in worship. So he recognized that these were not ordinary men. How he recognized it, we don't know. But he bowed himself down. Now, I want to emphasize that this might not be he already recognized that they're otherworldly or from God in that essence. But this is because we have to understand what this bowing refers to. So let's look at the context of the different things. Okay. By this number here, okay, to bow down. That's all that word means. Okay. You can do it before an angel, as we see there. You can do it before false gods. You can do it before God. And this same bowing is also given to kings. Okay. Now they might not prostrate themselves, but a bowing, yes, they would do. Okay. So it depends on the context. Now in this context, and he bowed himself to the ground. So he's down on the ground. And he said, what does he say? My Lord. Okay, so the first person that would come across that word, my Lord, Adonai, right? They would automatically assume that it means God. Now, I want to emphasize something. Okay, there's a secret in this. Okay, of who this is. There's a secret of who this is. Okay, because I want you to look at the number up here, the number of men. So let me ask you a question. How many are in the Trinity? 3, right? How many men were standing there? 3. And what does he call these 3 men? Adonai, my Lord. Now, Adonai simply means Lord. So there's 2 outcomes based on just that information. Okay, just 2 different outcomes. The first outcome is the Trinity itself. Okay, shows up to Abram. Okay, that's the first outcome. With that being said, you would have to go, okay, first of all, that means Abraham saw God. So you would have to take that into context if that was the case, which at this point, it's hard to really tell just by the words. But we do know Adonai. Now, we also have to keep in mind that the word Lord is also given to kings. So what does this mean? Look, firm, strong, Lord or master. So if someone's your master, you call him Lord as well. You also call a king a Lord, right? My Lord, right? You also, in some areas, you also call your husband Lord. You also call a governor Lord, a prophet Lord, a prince Lord, a king Lord, right? So you get the idea, okay? You call Yahweh Lord. So just because it is, but it's recognition of superiority, okay, as it says. So just because they use the word Adonai, it doesn't automatically mean that this is the Trinity. It doesn't automatically mean this is God. But we do know for a fact it is not humans that he knows of, right? And he says, if I have found favor in your sight. Now, let's hold off on who this is for the most part, okay? Only things we've been able to establish, it's a celestial visitor based on the title, right? They appear suddenly, which means they weren't just normal humans, okay? And they were called Adonai. That's what we know so far. Okay? So let's continue. I have found favor. This word favor is, see if I say it right. Chin, okay? Favor, grace, or charm, or acceptance, right? In your sight. Not, I pray, do not pass on. In other words, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass me by. Your servant. So he's already established, hey, I'm a servant of you. Okay? I'm your servant. Now this is not although the word does mean slave or servant, look what else servants or worshippers of God, right? So he's already recognizing the authority of who's standing in front of him. And he's already recognizing that he's a servant of those people, those men. Verse 4. Let be brought, please, a little water. So that means that it's a physical. Let's look at the physical. He sees them physically. He's in the heat of the day. He looks up, he sees them physically, right? He looks up and he sees them physically. Okay? Then he offers them water. Let me say this. Spirits don't drink water. They don't drink water. They don't wash their feet with water, right? So he offers them a little water to wash your feet, right? And he offers them rest. Vahish shaha. If I'm saying that. Vihish shaha. To rest yourself, okay? And it does mean to lean on, to trust, and to support, but it also means resting in this context. All right, wash your feet and find rest where? Under the tree, okay? And I will bring a morsel of bread. Okay, so a morsel is a fragment, not a whole loaf of bread. Okay, bread, lashim. Okay, lashim, bread, fruit, or grain. Okay, sorry. Sorry, guys, I do apologize. I had a call coming in that I had to take. Okay. In any case, okay, let's continue. So he's offering them physical water to wash their physical feet, and he's offering them rest, physical rest under a physical tree. And then what he's saying, and I will bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh your hearts afterwards. So bringing them physical food, okay? You may refresh your hearts afterwards. You may pass by. So in other words, hey, let me give you food. Let me give you water to do whatever you want. Take rest. And then whenever you decide to pass by, you can do so. Inasmuch upon this, you have come to your servant. Meaning you have decided to come visit me. Thank you. And they said, yes. So who, wait, say that again. Who said yes? They. Why? Because there's three. Okay. You may do. He gives them permission. You may do. Okay. To do, fashion, or accomplish. Make. As you have said. So Abraham hurried. So hurried Abraham into the tent to Sarah, right? And said, Vayomer, if I'm saying it right, but I think it's Vayomer. Yep. Vayomer. Make ready quickly 3 says. Now, what is it said? We don't know what that is. A measure of flour or grain. So, in other words, make 3 bread, I guess, of meal. So, 3 says of fine meal. So, grain meal. Okay. Fine. Knead it and make bread. Ugat. Okay. Ugat. A disc of cake. As you see, a disc of cake, right? Or baked bread, in other words. And to the herd, so that's the herd of animals, Abraham ran and took a calf, a boy calf, okay, tender, so young and good, and gave it to a young man. Doesn't say who the young man is. And he hastened, way mahar, way mahar, okay, to hasten, to be hurried or be anxious or basically quickly. To prepare, okay, la asat or la asut, okay, to prepare, okay, to fashion, accomplish, same thing, it. So he took butter and milk and the calf which had been prepared, and he set it before them. So the word prepared here would mean kill it and basically, I mean, because it is dead, and they're not setting the calf in front of the three visitors just to stare at. You know what I mean? And he set it before them, and he stood by them. So he stood close by them under the tree, and they ate. So the three visitors ate physical food. Okay? And they said to him, "Where is Sarah? Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Here, in the tent." And he said, "Surely I will return to you." So now when it says he said, capital H, that means it's the visitors. He said, "Surely I will return to you according to the time of life. And behold, a son, Sarah, La Sarah, or Le Sarah, okay, your wife Shel, Sarah, was listening at the entrance." So he's like, she will have a son, and Sarah overheard the conversation from the tent, and she was listening, right here, listening. Shoma'at, Shoma'at, or something like that. So that means to hear, listen, or obey. And she heard that, and she was behind Abraham, and Sarah were old, well advanced in years. So basically, they were very old in age, and had passed being Sarah, the childbearing age. So, in other words, as we know, Sarah was not the childbearing age. She had already passed, way, way, way past the normal childbearing age. Okay. And this is talking about the specialness of the situation Sarah was going to have a kid in. Okay. It wasn't her normal childbearing age. It wasn't the normal human age that would bring a normal child. So God had to do something miraculous in order for her to get pregnant. Okay? Sarah, the age bearing of woman. Therefore laughed Sarah. So Sarah laughed. So did she laugh out loud? No. Right here. Within herself. Bekerba. Bekerba. If I'm saying that right. Okay, amidst, among, or in the inner parts. Okay, saying, so she laughed within herself. This kind of like chuckle under her breath, but more of like chuckle within herself, saying, "After I've grown old, shall I have to me pleasure? And my master being old as well," basically, and said, Yahweh to Abraham. So now she has spoken within herself. Now this gives you context, because hear this, okay? Angels can't read minds unless God tells them. Okay, angels cannot read minds unless God tells them what is said in the mind or in the heart. Okay, so angels, if this was mere angels, they would either have to have heard from God what Sarah was doing in her heart. That's the first option. The second option is this is the Trinity that visited Abraham, and therefore they know the inner thoughts of Sarah, and that's how they know, right? But either way it goes, they knew what happened. Because what did they say? Yahweh and said to Abraham, "Why this one did laugh, Sarah, saying, shall surely I bear a child when I am old? Is too hard for Yahweh anything?" Now let's stop here about the old part, okay? So Sarah is basically doing, okay, hey, I'm laughing within myself go, oh my goodness, really? You actually think I'm going to have a child at an old age? But she's not doing it verbally. She's doing it within herself. And all of a sudden, you have 3 visitors that have been spending time with your husband, and they say, why is your wife snickering about it? And then they repeat the words that she said in her heart. If that were to happen to anybody, we'd be like, okay, I'm really in trouble. You know what I mean? Because it's one thing if someone hears your words. It's another thing completely if you don't even have privacy within your heart, within yourself. Okay, it just takes on a whole new context. Okay, so let's continue. So she's snickering, she's doubting God. Now Yahweh says, is anything too hard for Yahweh? So he's like, hey, why are you doubting? Basically, if this was nowadays, he'd be like, girl, what's wrong with you? Why are you blind to what God can do? If that would be the today version, okay? But he's not speaking to the girl, he's speaking to Abraham. So it'd be something like, yo, bro, why your girl laughing and doubting what the Almighty can do? What's up with that? Sorry, I'm just throwing a little humor and context to it. But let's just be honest. Today, we would be using the words of today. So it would be something like that. Okay? You get the point. And he says, is anything too hard for Yahweh? Okay? God's allowed to talk about himself. Let's just say that. Okay? Is anything too hard for God at the appointed time? I will return. So this appointed time, it's separated. The first statement is anything too hard for Yahweh? Simple as that. Then goes into the next thing. At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, shall have Sarah and a son. So Sarah shall have a son. But denied it, Sarah, saying, not I did not. So now she's lying to God. Okay? Because whether these are angels that you believe, or whether this is the Trinity, right? Which is where I'm leaning towards. Now you're lying to God. And no matter what you believe about who this is, it's still lying to God, because the same thing happens with 2 people in the New Testament when they go before, I think it was Peter. Okay, they lied to him about the money being hidden, and they end up dying. It's never a good thing. So they denied it. This word denied, but denied it. Okay, zet te cha chach, denied. Okay, to deceive, to lie, to fail, to be disappointing, to be untrue, to be found a liar. See? Okay. So Sarah was lying. And she outright said, I did not laugh. And what was the reason why she lied? She was what? Afraid. What is one of the motives why people lie? Because of fear. Fear or afraid in this context, not revere. Now, yes, the word afraid in the Old Testament also can mean reverence, but that's referring to God. Like, I fear God, I have reverence for God. But in this context, it's the other ones. It's the ones of, I'm fearful and I'm afraid. Because you can tell what's in there. So what does the visitors, Yahweh, say? Because they do give a title to this. Yahweh. Okay? That's why I'm leaning towards this is the Trinity visiting Abraham. Because of that title, Yahweh. Right? But it doesn't mean Lord. It does mean Lord. Adonai does mean Lord. This is talking. So I have to correct something. So before we were doing Adonai, Adonai simply means Lord. We only had a Lord, right? being said, Adonai, right? Now we have one of the people in this group of three people talking, and it directly says Yahweh. So this is God. God is there, right? Reads the mind, reads the heart. So now we have an understanding of who it is based on Scripture, right? And he said, no, but you did laugh. So he's like, you're incorrect, sister. You laughed. You doubted God, right? And he rose from there, the men, that would be the three men that Yahweh is, right? So what is this next section, right? Abraham begs for Sodom. Okay? He begs for Sodom. Okay? Let's talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? So let's look at the context. Okay? He begs. He begs for Sodom. Okay? Okay? He begs for Sodom. So let's read this section, beginning with verse 6 of he begs for Sodom. And rose from there. So the visitors got up, the men, that would be the three men, and looked toward Sodom. Okay? And Abraham went with them. So he's traveling with them to send them. And Yahweh said, I shall hide from Abraham what I am doing. So I'm not going to let Abraham know what my purpose is in going to Sodom. Okay? Since Abraham surely shall become a nation great. That's talking about the promise from Genesis 17. Okay? And mighty, and shall be blessed in him all the nations of the earth. So, how many nations of the earth? All the nations of the earth will be blessed because of Abraham. For I have known him. Now, this is an important word that we need to have known. Now, there's two different understandings of this word known, right? One understanding of the word known is to lay with, right? I know this person. I lay with this person in the Old Testament. I've seen that myself. This particular one, look at what it means, right? To know something, to learn something, to perceive something, or to discern something, okay? And it's pronounced yadativ, if I'm saying it right. In order, so I have known in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of Yahweh, right? The way of Yahweh. So in other words, they keep walking in the way of the Lord is the best way to say that. How do you keep it? Look at what it says next. By doing what is right. So how do you keep and honor walking in the way of the Lord? By doing what is right and just, right? Now remember, in the Old Testament, it was a works-based salvation. Okay, that's an important piece that you need there. It was a works-based salvation, right? By doing what is right. So let's look at this word, these few words. By doing, to do, fashion, or accomplish, right? What is right? Justice, righteousness, right? Truthfulness, righteous acts, ethical, right? And just, okay? Judgment, justice, ordinance, etc. Do what is just, do what is right, do what is proper, okay? That may bring Yahweh to Abraham, right? What he has spoken. So pay attention to this word right here. May bring. God desires always to keep his promises to the people he speaks to. But the reason it says may right there is because it's a conditional, right? It's conditional on Abraham and his household and his children doing what? doing what is right and just. If they don't do what is right and just, then the condition is failed, right? And they haven't kept the covenant, and then consequences happen. So you get the idea, right? Yahweh to Abraham what he has spoken to him and said, Yahweh, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities, because is great their sin. Okay? This Old Testament, their sin. But sin or sinfulness. Okay? Sin or sinfulness. Okay? Now I want to emphasize something. Okay? This sin here isn't talking about accidental sin. Okay? In the Old Testament, one of the words for accidental sin is het, H-E-T, or chet, C-H-E-T. Okay? It means accidental sin. Okay? You're not doing it on purpose. It's accidental. You weren't trying to sin. You fell into it. Maybe through ignorance or blindness. Okay? So you get the idea. This context, right, that they were doing is intentional sin. Okay? We get that because we get the context. This is not talking about they sinned one time accidentally. Okay? Because of the word outcry. Okay? Their sin, because the grave is very, I will go down now and see whether the outcry against it, so the offense against the towns that has come to me. That means that God hears your sins in some sort of way. He receives notification about yours. Just as your phone would receive notification, God receives notification in the Old Testament when your sins are great, right, to me, that has come to me. Now, check that out. God didn't go to the sin, or I should say, God didn't go to find the notification of the sin. The notification of the sin went up to God. Okay? So he's checking out on the city, whether they have done altogether, and if not, I will know. Okay? So, in other words, he's heard an outcry of these people are doing this, these people are doing that. Okay? Whether it's from themselves that they're doing, which I highly doubt, or whether it's the law itself going, these people, holding these people accountable. However this outcry goes up to God, right? God is like, let me come down and see for myself. I want to see for myself. Okay? And I will know, and turned away from there. Okay? So turned away from there, the men, and went towards Sodom. Okay? So Yahweh, the three men, turned towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood. So he stood still before Yahweh. So who's there? Before Yahweh. And came near Abram and said, so Yahweh comes near to Abram and said, oh wait, sorry. Abraham comes near to Yahweh and says, would also you destroy the righteous? Word righteous right there. Just, lawful, or righteous person. Now in the Old Testament, this is like good people. Basically people who try their hardest to live right and are righteous in the eyes of God. There are not many. But basically, Abraham is asking God, are you going to wipe out the wheat with chaff? Get the idea. Okay. So, in other words, yes, you want to take out the evil ones. But are you going to take out the evil ones at the expense of the good ones? You know what I mean? Like, are you, if the good ones are in the same vicinity as the bad ones, are you going to let the good ones die just because you want to get the bad ones out the way? Right? Are you going to destroy the righteous with the wicked? Rasha is the word. Rasha, okay? Wicked or criminal, guilty one. Right? Then he asked a question. Suppose that's a like hypothetical. Suppose there were 50 righteous people. So he's like, what if there's 50 righteous in the city? Would you destroy it and not spare it? For the place of 50 righteous that were in it. Then he reminds God of God's goodness. He says, far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked. In other words, you're a good God. You're not the kind of God that's going to kill the innocent with the wicked. So that should be the righteous as the wicked, far be it from you shall the judge of all the earth do not right. So in other words, translation in basic terminology, you're a good God. We know you're a good God. So because we know you're a good God, we don't expect evil decisions to come from you. We expect good and right decisions to come. So what does Yahweh say back to him? So said Yahweh, if I find, right, find, this word doesn't mean find, right, to find or attain, discover, detect, okay, to come upon, to light upon, discovery, detection. If I find in Sodom, city of Sodom, 50. Now remember, this is not talking about the city of Gomorrah. This is talking about just the city of Sodom. If I find 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare it. Right? I will spare it. To lift or bear up or carry or to take. So this would be like not repentant. This is, I will remove what I'm about to do. Okay? All the place on their account. So in other words, if I find 50, check that out though. If I find 50, I'm going to spare the entire city just for the sake of those 50. So let's say there's 1,000 people, right? He's going to spare all 1,000 people just for the sake of those 50 righteous. See? That tells you how important the righteous are to God. Right? And he answered Abraham and said, behold, please, I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Now that's Abraham talking, by the way. Speak to the Lord, Adonai, right? And I am dust. So he's recognizing that he is nothing in comparison to God. I am dust and ashes. Talking about what he's formed out of. Suppose there were less than 50 righteous ones there, right? 5 you destroy, right? Suppose there were less than the 50 righteous ones. 5, would you destroy for a lack of 5? In other words, what if there was only 5? Okay? It looks like, I don't know, that kind of looks like 5, but we also got 50. So I would have to look at the English in order to know for sure what number they're talking about. But basically, we understand the context from the English, which is basically Abraham is going down in numbers. He's going, okay, what if there's 50? Okay, what if there's 25? Okay, what if there's 5? Right? Would you destroy for a lack of 5 all the city? He said, not, I will destroy. So Yahweh says, no, I'm not going to destroy for the sake of the righteous. If I find 45, and again, so he's at 45, and again, yet he spoke and said to God, suppose there should be found, now this is hypothetical still, there should be 40. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 40. And he said, please not be angry. So at that point, he's like, look, I know I'm kind of a little bit bothering you, but I don't mean to do it intentionally. So please have mercy on me. I'm not trying to challenge you or your decisions. Right? Do not be angry. Yahar, Yachar, angry, Yachar. Right? Yichar, right? To be hot, furious, or burn, become angry. Right? Do not, please the Lord, do not become angry. And I will speak. Suppose should be found there 30. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 30. And he said, please, behold, I ventured to speak. venture, right? To begin or make a beginning, to show willingness or undertake, to agree or show willingness. But this is more like a humble begging. Please, please, please. Because right there's that word, please. Not, right? The not, yeah, not. Okay. To speak to the Lord. So right there, Adonai. So we now know who those three are. That's the Trinity. Okay. Suppose should be found there 20. So now the number's going down. It was at 50, now it's down to 20. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. And he said, please not be angry. So he reminds God, hey, I'm human. Please be patient. Ladonai, right? The Lord, Ladonai, my Lord, right? And I will speak. But once more, suppose there should be only 10, right? And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10, right? So it went from 50 down to 10. So went his way, Yahweh. So Yahweh went his way towards Sodom as soon as he finished speaking with Abraham. So, in other words, here's what's going on. Okay, you have three men there, right? They're walking with Abraham, right? The men, and it doesn't say how many men. It just says the men leave and go towards Sodom. Okay, the one that's standing there talking to Abraham, that's Yahweh. That's God, right? So he went his way, Yahweh. So now Yahweh goes with the other two. Okay? There is three there. Speaking with Abraham. And Abraham returned to his place. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this chapter. Okay, so there's a few things I want to say to you. First of all, do not test God. Okay. I know Abraham did this, but this is why he's saying don't be angry with me. Don't test God. But this is to point out the value of the righteous in God's eyes. And how you can understand that. Okay? And it's also to point out to you, stop doubting God. Just because it doesn't make sense to you, doesn't mean you have the right to doubt God. It doesn't mean you have the right to snicker in your heart or make fun of God or think that it's foolishness or anything else. Don't do it. Okay? Don't be like Sarah to talk within your heart and be like, oh, God can't do this, God can't do that. Because first of all, God knows exactly what you're doing. And God's going to bring it to the surface in front of your face and be like, hey, you said this, you said this. You're going to be accountable to that. Okay? In any case, guys, I will see you for the next video I will do today, which would be Genesis 19. Okay? Be blessed and take care.